Hi everybody, hope you're doing good. Professor Little here. Just wanted to review a couple of simple things with you. I'll use this family budget, which is the first review assignment for an example. The book doesn't have a whole lot of shortcut keys, but one that is helpful is Control Page Up and Control Page Down. That will navigate you through your different sheets of your workbook. So Control Page Up takes you to the previous page, Control Page Down takes you to the next page. And as a reminder, your fill handle is the little icon in the bottom right hand corner of your cell. Now, I know I introduced to you the shortcut key Alt equals for entering the sum function, so I wanted to give you an example of that concept select to effect. When you select a range of cells, such as this example, I can do Alt equals to be able to go ahead and complete the sum function in all of those range of cells at the same time. Okay, so I want to spend a minute talking about cell references and how those work with formulas. So as you know that at the grid, the intersection of every row and the column is your cell reference, and by default all cell references in Excel are relative. And basically what that means is a relative cell reference will change if you copy it, and the change occurs based on the movement on the grid. So in this example here, I'm going to just build a very simple formula to be able to add my January total sales for sodas to the January sales for my snacks, so cell B11 plus B12. Now those are relative cell references, so what that means is when I go to copy that formula to use it somewhere else, the cell references are going to change relative to my movement on the grid. So if I move over one column, then the B will become a C. So if I copy this total over to February and I evaluate the cell references, you're going to see that they automatically changed by one column reference from B to C because I moved my position of the grid by one column. Now subsequently, if I copy this cell and actually the content and I paste it over in March, once again you can see that I moved two columns over. So because I started with B, I just calculate 2, B, C, D, and that automatically reestablishes my relative cell reference. So under some circumstance you do want to have relative cell references. There are some other cell references, absolute cell references, which means that when I build a formula, that cell reference is never going to change. So if I have this example here and I want to make sure that these cell references never change if I copy them somewhere, then I can click within the cell itself and use my toggle on my keyboard, which is F4, and F4 is a toggle, so each time I hit it, it's going to toggle me between the relative, absolute, and mixed cell references. So all I'm doing is hitting that F4 key to toggle to where I want. Now I'm going to go ahead and make this an absolute cell reference so you can see what happens when I go to copy this formula. So here I have an absolute cell reference of cell B11 and then a relative cell reference of B12. So if I copy this over one column, this B11 cell reference will not change, because remember, absolute cell references do not change when you copy them or move them, and a relative cell reference will. So if I copy this over to February, what you're going to see is that it's taking cell B11 plus cell C12. Now in this case right here, it ended up giving me the same calculation, but let's say for instance that cell C11 was something different. My calculation would be incorrect because this is an absolute cell reference, and when I copied, it didn't copy my formula and change that automatically for me. Now, when are good circumstances to make your cell references relative, absolute, or mixed? Well, it just really depends on your spreadsheet that you're trying to accomplish. So if you have like a constant, say for instance a date or a factor that you're wanting to use, that's often a good way to use the absolute cell referencing. So in this example, I want to take my total from January and calculate a 10% increase in that calculation. So to build my formula, I would just reference my cell that contains that total and multiply this by my factor of 10%. So I'm saying, okay, Excel, take whatever's in B13, which is my total 150, and multiply that by my factor of 10%. And that works just fine. That shows me 10% of 150, and then I would need to add back in my total for January, because what I'm trying to accomplish here is an actual 10% increase, because I'm projecting my sales for the next quarter based on my first quarter. So here I've done my calculation, and now when I go to copy and use my fill handle to copy this, there's going to be a problem, because my May is not calculating, because it's not able to reference this factor to cell B17. Remember, when I copy a relative cell, the value changes relative to my movement on the grid. So when I copied this formula from April to May, it took my B17 and it made it a C17, which is not what I want. So what I really want to do is, when I build this formula, when I want to reference this factor in B17, I never want that to change. So I need to go up here on my formula bar and use that toggle key F4 to make that an absolute cell reference. And that way, when I go to copy this formula, it will always reference that cell B17 instead of changing it. It will remain the same. So a mixed cell reference is just one that where you either want the column to remain the same or the row to remain the same. And in this first example, the column would change but the row would not, and subsequently if you have the dollar sign next to the column reference, that stays constant, and then the row would change. So those are how cell references work in Excel.